village of Dornbridge lay half-buried in fog, surrounded by black hills and a river that never stopped whispering. No one went near the old Harrow house anymore. The shutters were nailed, the gardens drowned in ivy. Locals said you could still hear a man crying inside when dawn came, calling a woman's name that no one remembered for sure. Years ago, before the silence, Wren came to Dornbridge alone. She said she'd inherited the Harrow property from a distant aunt, but no one ever saw her receive letters or visitors. She was quiet, pale, always in long coats and gloves even when the weather turned warm. The townsfolk liked her politeness, but kept their distance. Silas Arden met her by chance one afternoon. He was the young physician of Dornbridge, practical, kind, too curious for his own good. Mara had fainted near the riverside, and he helped her home through the mud. Inside the house, he noticed the air was unnaturally cold, though the fire was burning bright. Portraits on the walls seemed to watch him. When she awoke, she thanked him with a voice soft as falling snow. He should have left then, but something in her eyes, sorrow mixed with fear, stayed with him long after. He began visiting her, at first to check on her health, then because he couldn't stop thinking about her. She'd sit by the window at dusk, reading by candlelight. He told her stories from town. She laughed once, lightly, as if she hadn't done it in years. But there were strange things. She never came out in daylight. Her curtains stayed drawn. Sometimes he'd find dried blood on her sleeves, and she'd hide her hands before he could ask. Once, he thought he saw a figure standing behind her on the landing, tall, motionless, eyes glinting red like hot iron. When he blinked, it was gone. Deaths began in early spring. Cattle drained dry in the fields, then a stable hand, then a widow found pale and lifeless behind her barn. People spoke of a sickness, but Silas knew better. He'd seen the marks on their throats. He confronted Mara one stormy night. She didn't deny it. She stood by the hearth, trembling, and whispered, "He follows me everywhere." She told him about Lysander, the one who made her what she was. Decades ago, she had served as a nurse during the border wars. A soldier came in, wounded, dying. She'd tended his wounds, fallen in love with him, before she learned what he truly was. When she tried to leave, he cursed her with his hunger. She fled from country to country, changing names, but he always found her. "He doesn't love," she said. "He owns." Silas wanted to save her. He researched every cure, every superstition. Garlic, silver, prayer, nothing would free her. And every night she grew paler, weaker, as though the thing still drank from her across distance. Finally, one dusk, she sent him a note. "Come at midnight. Don't bring light." He obeyed. Harrow House was darker than ever. The windows were sealed with boards. He heard her voice upstairs, steady and calm, as if speaking to someone unseen. Then came silence. When he entered the room, he froze. Lysander was there, no longer pretending to be human. His face was smooth and bloodless, his eyes like wet coal. Mara lay against his chest, her skin almost luminous in the candlelight. "Leave him!" Silas shouted, grabbing the poker from the fireplace. Lysander turned his gaze on him and smiled. "You can't take what's mine." Before Silas could move, Mara spoke. Her voice was soft, but sharp enough to cut through the dark. "Enough. You'll kill him too. You'll kill everyone. She looked at Silas then, with tears in her eyes. Forgive me. Before either man could react, she leaned back against Lysander's chest. Drink, she said. The vampire hesitated, sensing something in her tone, then obeyed. His mouth found her throat. She shuddered once, then went still. The room filled with the sound of his feeding, harsh and endless. Silas wanted to stop it, wanted to tear them apart, but something in her expression froze him. Her lips formed silent words. Wait for dawn. The hours crawled by. The candles melted to nubs. The first thin blade of sunlight slipped through a crack in the shutters. Lysander stiffened, growling, trying to pull away, but Mara's arms locked around him. She whispered, "Stay." He screamed as the light touched his skin. Smoke rose from his face, his body breaking into ash and cinders. Mara didn't let go. The fire spread from him to her, pale fire, not of heat, but of unmaking. By the time Silas forced the shutters open, it was too late. The sunlight flooded in, and the creature collapsed into dust. Mara lay still on the bed, her hands folded, her face peaceful. He gathered her in his arms. Her body was cool, lighter than it should have been. The smell of smoke and iron filled the room. He wept until his throat ached. When the townsfolk found him later that day, he was still sitting beside her, rocking gently, whispering her name as if it might wake her. Harrow House has stood empty ever since. The ivy swallowed the gates, the river took the road, and no one goes near it now. But on certain mornings, when the fog is thin, people walking by the ruins say they see a man standing in the window, his figure clear against the pale dawn, his head bowed. Some say it's Silas Arden, waiting for Wren to return. Others say it's both of them, one of shadow, one of light, standing side by side as the sun rises, together at last, after every horror between them has burned away. The village of Wren's Hollow sat deep in the folds of northern Vermont, where mist clung to the pines and winters felt older than time itself. At the edge of the woods, over the black water of Kellam Creek, stood a narrow covered bridge. It was built in 1892, the wood now warped and silvered by age. Locals called it the Bride's Crossing. Few used it anymore. The boards moaned under every step, and the air inside always smelled faintly of rain and iron. But everyone in town knew the story, the one whispered to travelers and told to children when the nights grew too long. It was about Clara Winter. Clara had grown up on the edge of Wren's Hollow, daughter to a miller who'd lost most of his fortune by the time she was 16. She was known for her quiet beauty, pale hair always braided, eyes the color of ash, and for her stubbornness. When she met Elias Rowan, a farmhand from the next valley, her father disapproved at once. Elias was kind but poor, and that was reason enough. They met in secret, in the orchard behind the mill or by the old bridge that crossed the creek. He would bring her scraps of poetry he'd written, folded into tiny squares, and she'd hide them in the hem of her apron. In the autumn of 1907, they decided to run away together. Elias promised he'd meet her at midnight at the bridge. They'd take a carriage to Rutland, then catch a train south to Boston where no one would know them. Clara believed him. She always did. That night, the wind was sharp and the moon low. She wore her wedding dress, stitched by hand from her late mother's lace, and carried a small bundle of belongings. She waited under the roof of the bridge while the river murmured below. The lantern she'd brought flickered, making her shadow tremble along the beams. But Elias never came. The hours passed. She waited until the oil ran out and the light died. She told herself he'd been delayed, that something had gone wrong with the carriage, that he'd still arrive if she waited just a little longer. Then came the dawn. By the time the sun reached the far ridge, Clara's mind had turned from love to despair. People would find her dress muddy, her secret known, her family disgraced. The thought of going home made her tremble. She climbed the inner beams of the bridge, tied her sash to the highest rafter, and stepped into the air before the morning light could reach her face. They found her the next day, still swaying gently, her veil caught in the breeze. No one knows what truly became of Elias. Some said he never meant to run away at all. Others whispered he'd been thrown from his horse on the road and lay dead in the woods while Clara waited. Whatever the truth, the bridge became a cursed place. It began with small things. Horses would panic when crossing it, as if something unseen brushed against them. Wagon wheels would jam, though the path was clear. By the 1920s, motorists began reporting stranger things. One couple said they heard footsteps on the roof of their car, as if someone were pacing above them. Another claimed to see a woman standing at the far end of the bridge in a wedding dress, her veil trailing along the boards. When they blinked, she was gone. Deputy Henry Tabor, who grew up in Wren's Hollow, once told a reporter what he'd seen himself. It was just after 2 a.m, fog so thick you could taste it. I parked on the bridge to check something in the trunk. That's when I heard the rope. Not a creak, a tightening, like it was right above me. Then my car shook once hard, and I swear I heard a girl cry. He left the engine running after that and refused to drive that road again. By the 1960s, teenagers treated the Bride's Crossing as a dare. They'd park their cars in the dark and wait, laughing, pretending not to be afraid. Some came back with scratches on their doors, long, thin marks that couldn't be explained by branches or nails. Others claimed to feel fingernails scrape their arms or necks. One girl, in 1973, said she felt her seatbelt tighten by itself, cutting into her chest until she screamed. Her boyfriend swore he saw the imprint of 2 bare feet on the roof of the car afterward, wet with condensation. The town council boarded up the bridge for a while after that, but every time they sealed it, someone would pry the planks loose again. Curiosity always wins over fear. Today, the bridge is quiet, half collapsed under the weight of years. Moss covers the beams, and the air inside smells like wet cedar and rust. Still, people visit, drawn by something they can't name. A young couple stopped there just last autumn. They'd heard the story from a local diner and wanted to see for themselves. The man parked the car in the middle of the bridge and turned off the headlights. For a moment, nothing happened, just the sound of wind moving through the rafters. Then the girl said, "Do you hear that?" He didn't, not at first. But then came a faint rhythm above them. Footsteps, slow, measured, deliberate. Wood creaked as if someone were walking directly over the car roof. He switched the lights back on, but the sound didn't stop. It grew louder. Then something tapped the windshield, gentle but unmistakable. Once, twice. They drove off so fast the tires screamed. When they reached the main road, they pulled over to catch their breath. That's when they noticed the marks, thin scratches along the hood, like the drag of fingernails. Neither of them spoke during the drive back. The locals say Clara still waits there. Some think she's looking for Elias, others that she wants to punish those who dare to laugh at her pain. A few believe she doesn't even know she's dead, that she's still standing in her wedding dress beneath the beams, lantern in hand, waiting for a man who never came. They say that if you stop your car in the middle of the bridge and turn off your engine, she might mistake you for him. You might hear the soft thud of her bare feet landing on the roof as she climbs down from the rafters. If you listen too long, you'll hear the rope pull tight again, and her voice, faint and cracked, whisper your name through the fog. And when you drive away, if you dare to look back, you might see her standing in the center of the bridge, her veil fluttering in the cold wind, her shadow stretching longer than any living thing should. No one stays long enough to see the sunrise there anymore, because everyone in Wren's Hollow knows, when dawn comes, the bride always hangs alone.
The doctor's words still echoed in his mind as Captain Adrian Ward leaned against the carriage door, the wind of the high country sharp on his face. "It remains only to get you out of this cold and poisonous city," the doctor had said, "and give you 2 months of pure air and an easy conscience." The conscience part was his own business, but the air, yes, that belonged to the mountains. The doctor's friend, a country priest, had arranged for him to stay with a once grand family now reduced to ruin. The place, an old residencia high among the barren ridges, was to be his refuge. Adrian welcomed the thought of solitude. He had seen too much death in the war, and the city's noise and pity made him sick. He wanted silence, clean wind, distance. But when the doctor mentioned the family's strangeness and the priest's initial refusal to house him, he had felt something stir in him, curiosity, or perhaps a soldier's instinct for danger. He agreed without hesitation. Felipe came for him, a wiry, sun-dark boy driving a mule cart. His face had a kind of careless beauty, marred only by something too sharp in the eyes, something feral. He talked incessantly, words tumbling out in fragments, about trees, about a crow he once saw perched on one. The kind of talk that wandered without reason, like a child lost in thought.
The boy's fear began when they entered the gorge. The mountain river below roared like 1,000 voices in torment, echoing between the cliffs. Felipe flinched every time the sound swelled, his hands trembling on the reins. "What are you afraid of?" Adrian asked. "The noise," Felipe whispered. "It remembers." The words made no sense, but Adrian didn't press. By the time they reached the plateau, night had swallowed the road. The residencia loomed out of the dark, massive, silent, its black outline set against a sky bruised purple. The gates creaked open, a candle flickered somewhere ahead. The courtyard smelled of damp stone and decay. Inside, the house was a maze of corridors and echoing stairs. The boy led him to a large, bare room with 3 shuttered windows, a roaring fire, and a bed covered in animal skins. Adrian was almost grateful, until he noticed the portrait. It hung above the fireplace. A woman, young and slender, with red gold hair and a face that was almost perfect. Almost. There was cruelty in the set of her mouth, hunger in the eyes. The painting was so lifelike it seemed to breathe, to watch. He thought it a trick of fatigue until he saw Felipe standing beside it, his expression vacant, and realized the resemblance.
In the days that followed, the house grew stranger. He never saw anyone but Felipe, who served him with a nervous eagerness that bordered on worship. The boy could be laughing one moment, then hissing with sudden fury the next. Once, when Adrian scolded him, Felipe overturned the tray of food and fled, eyes flashing gold in the firelight. There was another figure, the mother.
She sat each day in a pillared recess of the courtyard, always in the same spot, her copper hair shining like flame. She was beautiful, but empty. Her eyes held no recognition, no thought, only a dull animal pleasure as she basked in the sunlight, brushing her hair and murmuring about warmth and doves. When Adrian greeted her, she smiled vaguely, as though hearing a pleasant noise she couldn't quite understand. It was grotesque and pitiful all at once. He told himself it was decay, aristocratic blood turned to rot through isolation and madness. Yet something deeper pressed on him, something instinctive, unspoken. At night he dreamed of the woman in the portrait. Her face leaned close to his, whispering in a voice of silk and venom. When he woke, her painted eyes seemed to gleam faintly in the firelight. The storm came on the 10th day. It began with a wind that howled down the mountains, carrying red dust and feverish heat. The whole house groaned under it. The shutters banged. The courtyard was a whirl of pomegranate petals and dead leaves. Even the mother was unsettled. She paced the pillars, muttering and gesturing wildly. Felipe trembled like a dog. That night, the wind screamed without pause. Adrian tried to read, but the sound of it, it was more than weather. It was like voices, countless voices crying at once. Then, near midnight, a new sound cut through the gale. A shriek so raw, it turned his blood to ice. It rose and fell, human but monstrous, until it became unbearable. Adrian ran to his door, only to find it locked from the outside. He pounded with his fists, "Felipe!" No answer, only those unholy cries echoing through the house. Then, silence. When dawn came, the storm was gone. The air was thin and bright, the mountains glittering with dew. But the memory of those screams followed him. He resolved to uncover the truth. That afternoon, he found the daughter's room. It was stark, bare walls, no luxury, only books and papers. A fire had burned low in the hearth. On a table lay a few pages of writing in pencil, a fragment of a poem. Pleasure showed the lovely sun. Grief with a wreath of lilies came. The hand was delicate, the tone devout. So there was another, one he had not seen. The daughter, Olala. Her name came to him as if he had known it all his life. He met her 3 days later. It was noon. The courtyard slept under a white haze. As he reached the top of the stair, a door opened, and she stood there. The sight of her stopped his breath. She was the portrait made living, yet purified of its corruption. Her hair fell loose over her shoulders. Her eyes, wide and luminous, seemed to hold the light itself. They didn't speak. They only looked at each other. That moment, those few seconds of perfect silence were enough. He loved her. What followed was torment. He could not stop thinking of her, yet she avoided him. When their eyes met, it was as if both were caught by some spell neither had the strength to break. And then, one morning, she came to him in the valley below the house. Her voice, low, musical, alive, was the first human thing he had heard in weeks. "You must go," she said. "Today."
He poured out everything then. His love, his loneliness, his promise to save her from this place. She listened with tears trembling in her lashes. "You don't understand," she whispered. "If you love me, go. He stepped toward her. "Then come with me." For an instant she stood still. Then she turned and fled among the cork trees, swift as a deer. He returned to his room, dizzy with longing. On his desk lay a folded paper, her handwriting. "If you have any kindness for Olalla, go from here today, in pity, in honor, for the sake of him who died. Go." The words blurred. He pressed his hand to his face and drove it straight through the window pane. Blood spurted from his wrist. He staggered downstairs, seeking help. The mother was there, half asleep by the fire. "I've cut myself," he said. "I need—" She looked up. Her eyes widened, pupils narrowing to pinpoints. Then she leapt. Her hands seized his arm, her mouth fastened to the wound. The pain was blinding, the shock worse. He struck her, but she lunged again, snarling, her teeth red. Those were the same screams, the cries of the storm. He would have died there had not Olalla burst into the room. She dragged her mother back as Felipe rushed in, holding her down. Adrian collapsed. When he woke, Olalla was beside him, binding his hand, whispering sounds too soft to be words. Her tears fell on his skin. Yet even then, he saw the same hunger flicker across her face and vanish, leaving only shame and sorrow. "Olalla," he said weakly, "I love you." She wept harder. "You must go. Our blood is cursed. It remembers what we were before God touched us. I fight it, but I feel it in me. Go now, while you still can." He reached for her hand, pressed it to his heart. "I don't care." She placed his hand on her chest. "It beats you, but it's not mine. It never was. We are born with borrowed flesh, borrowed sins. If I stay with you, I'll damn you." Then she kissed his hand, rose, and was gone.
Felipe carried him down from the mountain at dawn. Through the pale mist, Adrian looked back at the old house. 3 windows still burned faintly with light, her windows. Then the road dipped and the residencia vanished. He never saw her again. But sometimes when the wind howls across lonely hills, he swears he can hear a voice among the echoes, low, sorrowful, and tender, calling his name. Adrian,